Well, not being afraid of doing something different. Sometimes doing something different, to be quite honest with you, and having those results, and then watching individuals depend upon you to make the hard decisions at times. And as opposed to just talking the talk, that just naturally leads to walking the walk as far as becoming a leader and recognizing that you have something to give, and being who you are and where you're from. And for me also, the education that I was able to receive, that not to be afraid of that. And it evolves into, even if you didn't intend it to be, to leadership, and to propel you into a leadership position. Both. You almost have to have money to organize nowadays. That's why the president had to continually, he had great organization. I don't know if he would have had that great organization if he didn't also have money. It's hard to say, bottom line, all being said, organization is key in an election, because if you don't have the people with you, you can have all the money in the world and you can't get elected. I've seen more often where individuals have more money than someone and lose because the other person was more organized than I've seen the person that's more organized that, lose to someone who just because someone had some money. That being said, in today's politics, especially at the congressional and senatorial and presidential level, you need the money to help the organization. And that's why it becomes tremendously important, because you have to pay for the expertise to have the organization. So to one extent, is what comes first, the chicken or the egg? Back in the 60s, when my parents were very involved in politics, etc., people volunteered to do things. Oftentimes today, you don't see as many people volunteering. You have to pay folks in a certain area to get the volunteers. So you need at least some money to help organize, because you're not going to be successful without organization, and the money helps you have the organization. If you have the money and no organization, that doesn't mean anything either. But to have the organization and less money, that's more important in my estimation. But as I said previously, there's too much money in politics, I believe. And as a result of it, you have to spend too much time raising money as opposed to the other responsibilities that you have as an elected official. Oftentimes, I think one has to ask him or herself, when you're in Congress, are you there to lead? Because sometimes they say member of Congress, you're supposed to be a leader. So are you there to lead and try to lead your district in regards to what you have learned and what you understand from the broad from the broad exposure that you've had? Or do you simply follow what the majority of individuals in your district say, even if you think that they're not correct? That's, I go through that sometimes with decisions that I make. I talk to some of my colleagues in that regards, and people differ on that issue. Some say, hey, I'm there as a representative, and so I'm just going to do what the majority of my district says. which I think makes them inflexible. Others, I know my position is I have to sleep with myself. So I'm going to try to do what I think is correct and go back and explain it to my constituents and see if I can convince the majority of them that I'm doing the right thing and therefore they reelect me. And if they don't, then that's just the way it is. I have to find another job. But too often, individuals, and I can't say who's right or who's wrong. It's a representative government. I like to think, though, that we should be leaders. I'd like to think that means making difficult choices at difficult times that may not be popular when you make that decision, and let history, if you will, determine whether you made the right choice or not down the road. You had, at that time, a Democratic House, a Democratic Senate, and a Republican president. So it took leadership, quite honestly, of the presidential administration to convince members of the Financial Services Committee and of the House and the Senate that we had to do something. It took leadership on behalf of the members and the leadership in the House and the Senate that we're going to have to work with this president who's not of our party to try to get to some kind of bill that we can pass and that he will sign. I also believe a lot of leadership is about listening. I know on my own, at that time, I was the chairman of the subcommittee on international monetary policy and trade. And I had to listen a lot. And then talk to people on different sides of the issue. Some of it I understood, some of it I had to learn. And for me, leadership is also recognizing that. And then learning what you need to learn. And listening and hiring individuals who are probably smarter, who are smarter than you. But taking what they say, understanding it, digesting it, and then making a decision to moving forward to get it done, I think is also leadership. And I saw many members of Congress do just that. Now, we've got a lot of struggles, but I also have found the people out there to be very resilient and coming together and helping one another, where it had never happened before. So I think that we're going to figure this thing out, and it's going to be hard because we've got individuals at different levels that need different kind of help. If you live in public housing, there's one kind of help that you need. You need help, but there's one kind of help that you need. We've got to figure out with the New York City Housing Authority how to make sure the boilers are not in the basement any longer, so that if power goes out, people can still get up and down on an elevator and not be shut out so that they can't get food or have access to transportation. We got to figure that out. If you lost your entire home, we got to figure out how do you rebuild. And then you rebuild above sea level so that you're protected in case there's a flooding issue again or a surge of water that the way it came in. And that affects homeowners, whether you're a high-end homeowner or a low-end homeowner. It affects them all. And so we've got to figure out a way that we can make everybody whole again in that regard. Small businesses, which create jobs, and many of the individuals live in the peninsula, we've got to figure out how we get them back. Because one of the things that we learned from Katrina was that 70 to 80% of the businesses never came back. In the Rockaways, you're so isolated, those businesses don't come back. It's going to affect how people eat, where they get their food from. They don't have the transportation to go off many individuals, the peninsula, to get food. That's what the storm showed also. So we've got to get those businesses back and up. So for eating and for the economy of creating jobs. And we're going to do that. And so I could envision a Rockaway now that could have less flooding because infrastructure was poor, that could have more transportation. You know, the subway lines were knocked out. So now we've got to figure out, let's get the subway lines back, but let's think of some other creative mechanisms for other transportations, like ferry service. We don't utilize the waterways as the way we should. During this storm, and because the rail lines went down, we have temporarily utilized ferries, and people are starting to say, hey, this is a good method of transportation. We should increase it and keep it and make it permanent. Another thing that has come about that we said is there's another rail line that has not been in existence or been in utilization since 1962. All the rail lines previously go east to west. This goes north to south. So now maybe we should revitalize this railroad to go north to south that would have also given individuals an opportunity to get off the peninsula where there was no movement in that regards before. That's going to make the peninsula a better place, especially because we're looking to revitalize it with commercial establishments to go along with some of the increase in residents and building of homes that's there. And part of the key in attracting the kind of businesses that we want there is transportation. And getting other residents so they can understand that they work in downtown Manhattan, midtown Manhattan, or the Bronx. There's easy and quick forms of transportation to get you to and from, which enhances the peninsula. So it'll make it a much better transportational infrastructure than what we currently have, as well as create, in my estimation, more jobs and opportunities for individuals that live out there. And being who you are and where you're from. And for me also, you know, the education that I was able to receive, that not to be afraid of that. And it evolves into, even if you didn't intend it to be, to leadership and to propel you into a leadership position. Times doing something different, to be quite honest with you. And having those results and then watching individuals depend upon you to make the hard decisions at times. And as opposed to just talking the talk, that just naturally leads to walking the walk as far as becoming a leader and recognizing that you have something to give. All being said, organization is key in an election, because if you don't have the people with you, you can have all the money in the world and you can't get elected. I've seen more often where individuals have more money than someone and lose because the other person was more organized than I've seen the person that's more organized. Both. You almost have to have money to organize nowadays. That's why the president had to continually, he had great organization. I don't know if he would have had that great organization if he didn't also have money. It's hard to say, you know, bottom line, well, not being afraid of doing something different. You know, some